We'll be starting very shortly. Right, let's make a start. So welcome everyone. If you're here to talk about priorities and next steps for district councils in light of the English Devolution White Paper, you're in the right place. My name's Andrew Laird. I'm the Chief Executive of Mutual Ventures. We're a small consultancy that works with councils and with places and with district councils on supporting them to create better places for their residents and better and more sustainable public services. And I am delighted to be joined by a range of really great guests. So we've got Liz Elliott, who's the Deputy Chief Executive of Harborough District Council. Before that, Liz was heavily involved in the unitarisation in Northamptonshire and worked with the districts there. And obviously that is now two unitaries, Northamptonshire North and West. So Liz, hi, how are you?
Hi Andrew, it's good to be here and I'm looking forward to a good conversation and learning as well as imparting knowledge. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Liz. It's great to have you here. Also, we're joined by Professor Donna, who is most well known for her time as the Wigan Chief Executive and implementing the Wigan deal. But before that, slightly less known, Donna was also the Chief Exec of Chorley District Council and implemented the Chorley Smile, which is another brilliant example of a social contract with citizens. And Donna is now also a non-exec director at Mutual Ventures. Donna, great to see you.
Thanks very much, Andrew. Really looking forward to the discussion.
Excellent. And then I've got two Mutual Ventures colleagues. I've got Sally Dickens, who is a senior consultant at Mutual Ventures, and Mark Bandalli, who is a managing consultant at Mutual Ventures. And Mark and Sally are leading a lot of our work with districts and working as part of our broader radical place leadership approach. Sally, how are you? It's good to see you.
Thanks, Andrew. Yeah, really looking forward to imparting some knowledge today.
Great. And Mark, good to see you too.
Hi, Andrew. Hi, everyone. Yeah, really looking forward to the discussion.
Great. So the backdrop to this discussion is the Devolution White Paper, which came out just before Christmas. And alongside measures to push devolution to mayoral combined authorities and strategic authorities, there was a big statement about intention to do local government reorganisation for two-tier areas across the country, and also where unitaries are failing. And the purpose of this discussion is not to debate the rights and wrongs of that. This is now a stated government policy, and it's where we are. So it's about what we do next. And at Mutual Ventures, we like to approach everything from a positive perspective. So we have developed what we call a radical place leadership approach, which is about supporting places to join up support for vulnerable people and families, to support collaboration. And it's with that kind of ethos in mind that what we really want to talk about today is the practical challenges for districts approaching reorganization, but also to try and talk about the fact that this is an opportunity for transformation, not just a structural transaction, which it can become because of the really difficult kind of technical challenge that local government reorganization is. But we should try never to lose sight of the opportunity that this provides as well. So some housekeeping. We are recording this, and I will be making the recording available by emailing everybody who is registered. If you'd like to ask a question, please use the Q&A function, which will be at the bottom of your Zoom page. And then what we will also be doing is producing a short note, just a couple of pages on some of the key themes from this discussion and some of the key things that we think districts should be thinking about at this point. So the purpose of this is to try and generate ideas and thoughts about what right now district leaders and those working within districts and considering districts should be thinking about in order to think about what they really want to get out of LGR and to achieve the best outcome for their residents. So that's what we're all about. So Mark, I'm going to come to you first. I just touched briefly on the Devolution White Paper, but could you give us some more detail on what the government's ambition for the future structure of local government is.
Sure, thanks, Andrew. I think that the headline from an LGR local government reform perspective in the white paper, the hard-hitting line is a requirement for all current two-tier areas and small neighbouring unitary authorities to establish themselves as unitary authorities. So, for example, as a practical example, if there were currently a county council and 5 districts operating within that same footprint, the white paper requires those councils to come together to combine and to form a new unitary authority, meaning the original 6 councils would no longer exist, and instead there would be this new unitary authority. There are some requirements specifically around the minimum population of the new unitary, which would be 500,000 residents minimum. This has created a lot of controversy. I think it's worth saying that there may be exceptions to that. However, decisions will be made on a case-by-case basis around the 500,000. I think it's an interesting question to ask, why 500? So the white paper is clear. The rationale for that is around the ability to increase capacity, to realise efficiencies and economies of scale, to withstand financial shocks, and importantly, and you can't really think about LGR without devolution and vice versa, to unlock devolution as well, which is obviously a key driver of the white paper. So the plan in the white paper is for a phased approach to local government reorganisation, with the first waves of reorganisation taking place during this Parliament. I've just mentioned the sort of key link with devolution. The white paper also says that local government reforms will be sequenced alongside devolution, those ambitions for a particular area, and that local government reform shouldn't delay devolution, and that plans for an area on LGR and on devolution should be complementary. So I think those really are the headlines. I think I've tried to summarise 120 pages in hopefully less than 2 minutes, but that's, from my perspective, in terms of this webinar, I think the key points.
Thanks, Mark. That's great. And I think everyone who will have been attracted to join this webinar probably has a fairly good grounding in it. So just good to get everybody on the same page with that summary. Liz, you're certainly experienced in the LGR process, maybe more so than you'd have liked to have been, but you have been through it a lot, and also you've explored partnerships between district councils as well. Informed by this experience, what do you think the main challenges that districts across the country are now facing?
Thank you, Andrew. Well, we're in a very period of uncertainty. The timelines are still unclear, although we might get some clarity from government maybe later today or later in the week on what those timelines might be. And that uncertainty creates a lot of challenge, because we've got people that are worried already, that it's starting to have an impact, even though we've only been a short period since the white paper came out. We're starting to see the impact on people. We're starting to see people wanting to know more, but there is no more at the moment. So the first sort of challenge is around getting that comms and engagement right, and really making sure that we start on a good grounding, sharing what we can, what we know, building those sort of networks as well, so that we can be looking to not just address staff concerns or members' concerns, but partners and communities as well will also be in this period of uncertainty. The change management aspect of it, I'm sure we've all seen the change curve or whatever. You will start to see that people might be resistant to change, that there might be productivity or motivational impacts. So again, managing that communications, managing that engagement with all of those concerned. But also it needs clear leadership from the start as well. And it's really difficult when you are leading a change that you are also significantly impacted by, because you need to be mindful that you are yourself being impacted, as well as trying to be positive about the change for all of the others. So it's useful to try and reflect as well back for me, is that personal resilience, this is a long haul. This is not a short win. This is 2 or 3 years to vesting day, and then after that is when some of the challenges occur as well. So this is, you're in it for the long haul. So make sure that your personal resilience as well as your support to others is a key consideration. Building those relationships and those conversations is going to be a challenge as well, because everybody is used to being in their sovereign bodies and then coming together to get that collective voice and what the future might hold and the opportunities for the future. That's the leaders and chief executives around the country will be sat in rooms for hours and hours trying to agree what a credible geography might be, what the proposal might be. There might be conflicting views as well. So the challenge around getting that cohesive one voice is I would imagine something that's been experienced already as the proposals start to get developed. So building those relationships is really key, making sure that you've got those in place as well. When you know your geography is obviously building with your new partners, etc. Obviously lots of difference of opinions as well. So trying to keeping the focus on the improvement for the future, I would say, is a challenge, making sure that you don't get bogged down in the detail too early, making sure you agree in those high-level principles, looking for those positives, as you said. Let's look at it for the positives, for the changes we can make for our communities and for the improvement to local government, which is when in Northamptonshire, improvement to local government, local support and that credible geography are the three criteria we tried to address. But also, for me, the challenge of getting structure in. I love governance, I love structure, I like to know whose roles and responsibilities and where those delegations and authorities come from. I think that the challenge of getting people coordinated and together can come from good governance early, getting that clear and making sure that you record some of those decisions and things that you make early as well. But it is a long time and there is a lot to do. So capacity for your organisation, freeing up this is now your day job. So forget what your day job was before. The next 2 or 3 years, this is what you will be doing the majority of your time on, making sure that you're empowering your staff, that you're giving opportunity for them to be involved, but also the capacity will be impacted. I think the challenge of keeping business as usual and this huge change, this is probably the biggest change that any one of the organisations involved has ever gone through. It's supposed to be a once in a career opportunity. This is my second time, so maybe not. But recruitment and retention as well is going to be really key, keeping staff motivation, but actually people needing to see where their future lies in the new organisation, the opportunities and the improvements for services, because we're all public servants and that's what we want to see. Trying to keep people involved and trying to keep them retained and also recruited into a very uncertain, well, will this organisation exist in 2 years? What's my future? Is going to be another key challenge as well, I think. And then I would say that the biggest challenge is keeping that positive mindset, keeping it going, keeping up to pace with it, but reminding yourselves that actually it is a big change and that you can't do everything. Would be my first initial thoughts, Andrew.
Fantastic, Liz. Thank you very much. I've just got one follow-up question, Donna. I'm going to ask you this question as well. This is a real leadership challenge, particularly for those leading district councils. And I'm sure some will adopt a more defensive position of kind of just either not communicating or sort of projecting an aura of knowing how this is going to go and, you know, real hero leadership almost. Whereas I think another way of approaching it is to be more open and be willing to discuss the uncertainty and the question marks which are there. It's quite a leading question, but how would you suggest to people in district councils how they engage with their teams, their stakeholders who will be really worried at the minute?
So I can only tell you what I did, and what I would do again is being open and honest, telling people that you can tell them some things and there'll be some things they won't know, telling them there will be uncertainty, but keeping that positivity around it as well, understanding that they will be going through that sort of change cycle, but trying to keep them on that. But, you know, hopefully that positive message will come through. It is tricky though to keep that positivity when there's such a lot of uncertainty and change, but also the well-being of staff, I think, and members as well.
Yeah.
I don't think members have uncertain futures as well. It's not just about the staff. So trying to look at the well-being and making sure that we keep checking in on that, as well as communicating and keeping that dialogue going, but also making sure that their health and well-being is looked after as well, and preparing them. Thanks, Andrew.
Thanks, Liz. Donna, can I ask you for your thoughts on the kind of leadership mindset in this period of uncertainty?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, Andrew. And I think as well as working at Chorley, I was at Blackburn with Darwin as Deputy Chief Exec when just after the unitary status, the kind of breaking away from Lancashire County Council. So you've got the interesting scenario of two unitaries within the middle of a huge county council with Blackpool and Blackburn. And it was interesting to see the two totally different leadership mindsets in those two places as they became unitary councils. Completely different approach to becoming unitary. One organisation, I won't say which, went for culture shift, really tried to think about the role and purpose of the organisation, tried to reach out to communities, tried to really change the whole nature of the organisation. And the other just stupid across the staff from adults and children's and kind of more or less kept the district intact with the additional services tacked on. It was interesting. I'm sure Liz has seen different approaches in her career too. I think we've got a real opportunity now to think differently about the whole approach to leadership, not just in terms of districts becoming unitaries, but unitaries merging together and becoming bigger unitaries. Because, you know, Wigan won't be big enough, for example. That's only got 324,000. So Wigan will be looking to merge with, say, Bury or Bolton or, you know, something like that within the Greater Manchester context. I think it's going to mean a massive shift for all councils, whatever shape they are, whatever size they are. So, yeah, I think it needs to be all embracing and really difficult to do, but away from self, because you can't help but worry about paying your mortgage, can you? You know, and thinking of obviously putting, as Liz said, putting the staff to the forefront and putting the citizens to the forefront.
Yeah.
I honestly think it's a ridiculous situation. We've got 400 councils in England, absolutely bonkers. How can you have 400 councils and effectively deliver services? Far too many. This does need, sorry, personal view, does need to happen in my view, but the way it happens needs to be to transform the entire role and purpose of a council in a place rather than just move the deck chairs.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. So Donna, just follow-up question with you. So you've started to get into the size of the proposed new unitaries here. What's your advice on trying to preserve the distinctiveness of a district footprint and that knowledge that those officers and councillors have of that district, bearing in mind your point about us having too many councils? We still don't want to lose that distinctiveness of a place.
I totally agree. And I'm not sure if Wendy's on the call. I know she was registered, but Wendy Lansdowne from South Cambridgeshire doing some amazing work on neighbourhood working. And for me, the whole distinctiveness of districts is that they're very close to their communities. I'm not saying county councils are not, but districts are, and there's lots of people in West Lindsey too as well who are incredibly close to their communities. And so that is the beauty of a district council, and we can't lose that. So making sure that we set up really clear neighbourhood devolved decision-making structures, integrated neighbourhood teams that pick up on that distinctiveness, not just of the district footprint, but of the kind of local neighbourhoods within that district. I think that is absolutely essential. So I've written down 5 things, all beginning with C, Andrew, for distinctiveness. Place. I'll just have to look at my notes just to remind myself. So the first thing is culture. I think, you know, really starting to think about a positive, as Liz said, really outward looking culture. There's a temptation with structural reform that you look inwards and you think about your own internal mechanisms, but really looking outwards towards the second C is communities. So really shifting the culture towards being more outward looking to communities for different models of decision making, looking to neighbourhood teams. And there's some brilliant examples of that happening in districts up and down the country. The third C is the community and voluntary sector, making sure that we tap into the rich assets that the community and voluntary sector have and make sure in any new strategic authority they are front and centre and a trusted partner. not a kind of parent-child relationship with the community and voluntary sector. Number 4 is councillors, elected members, making sure that elected members who are represented and voted in by the people who live in those neighbourhoods, making sure that there is a really good spread on any new strategic authority geographically of people, making sure they're represented by, you know, councillors who are community councillors, who do street surgeries, who don't just go to sit in the council chamber once a month, actually are out there canvassing the views of local people, feeding back what the council's doing in a very proactive ways. And then finally, the last C is compelling story of place. So making sure that each district council has a really clear story of its place so that it can feed into a new strategic authority and represent its citizens really well.
Thanks, Donna. That's really helpful. And actually, that last point about the story of the place, that's one of the first things we do, isn't it, when we go into to work with areas, is to get their truth, as if it were, what their story is. Some great points made so far. I think, Liz, really enjoyed your point about being transparent, and I think a good way of doing that is to get people engaged in a positive discussion about what a really good outcome could look like, and through doing that you can be honest about what questions are still up in the air a bit. And then Donna, your point there about just maintaining that neighbourhood connection, there is a risk that the proposals as they are look like they're pushing power down to strategic authorities, mayoral authorities, but then sucking power up to larger unitaries. So that neighbourhood approach within the new unitaries would really tackle that. Sally, I'd like to bring you in now. Thank you for being patient. So Donna's description there was very much about the critical role that place leadership plays. And what would you say from your experience of working with districts are the main characteristics of place leadership that you know districts and their leaders would want to see retained within a new unitary model?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been working with some district councils on their place leadership offer, looking at from the element of inclusive growth. And what's been really strong in this is moving away from organisational boundaries to thinking about place and how you make decisions at a place-based level, which for districts will include generating relationships both with communities, as Donna said, the VCS, but also what other stakeholders are out there to support those positive outcomes that you want for residents. And I think moving through the LGR process for districts and kind of whatever comes next is that real need to kind of approach problem solving through first getting a really good understanding of what are the strengths and challenges which exist in communities already, rather than kind of, I don't think it needs to be a blank slate essentially when it goes up to unitary level. And actually there's plenty knowledge and plenty information out there already of what works in certain places, what doesn't work, and what support's needed. So I think really the strengths of the kind of the place leadership approach that can be continued is that real hyper-local knowledge. And to do that, you'll have to really form those local relationships. And I think that can be continued through, and I agree that you really need to keep that community voice, even if it's an organisation that's covering 500,000 people, because that will still be super important to do.
No, that's great, Sally. Thank you. And I think this links back. Well, there's a common theme already about retaining that neighbourhood connection and making sure that just because this is a larger council footprint, it shouldn't lose that. And I think that feels like it's going to be a real challenge, and one that could get lost in the process if the process becomes a kind of a technocratic, you know, process where it's just about who moved where. So thank you, Sally. Really appreciate that. Mark, just to think, bearing in mind what Sally's just outlined there, well, what sort of practical steps do you think the district councils should be taking to ensure that all of that great stuff that we know districts do isn't lost in the process?
Yeah. Well, I think there's an opportunity to that great stuff that unquestionably districts do. Back to Liz's point around capacity, I strongly advise, I think, district councils to think about pulling together information, a compelling strategic narrative, and really a vision for the future for their communities and businesses. They're in a strong position to do that, given those strong local connections and that understanding, and really get to a point where there's a clear articulation. Everyone within a district council is very clear about what value it is that the council brings from a place leadership perspective. I would also encourage, I think, district councils to think about their role as place leaders and the value they bring through the lens of the government's 5 missions, because I think that will obviously is front and centre of national government, likely to be regional and local as well. So, growth, safer streets, opportunities for all, clear energy, and an NHS fit for the future. What does the district council have to say on that in terms of its role, but also what its communities and its businesses need? So ultimately, I think there's probably, and I'm going to pinch a lot of what Liz, Sally, and Donna have said, but I think there's 4 key stages that I'd recommend. The first is, following Sally's point, defining the council's place leadership role in terms of values, culture, approaches, the role of the council as a coalition builder, and all the good work that's going on there, and really being in a place to articulate very clearly and evidence-based what the place-based priorities are for a particular council in terms of their communities and businesses.
And it's never too early to start that, is it?
No,
Because, that will take a bit of time to get everyone agreed.
It will. And, there will be priorities in place. Do they need refreshing? Are they the right ones moving forward? So I think that's a really interesting point. Also, based on those priorities, how do we work with our partners as place leaders to meet these priorities? So there's critical elements there, but also from a place leadership perspective, there are plans. So being clear about identifying your pipeline of interventions, investments around skills, business support, innovation, infrastructure, housing, and so on, whatever the remit of the district council is. So I think point 1, define your current role as a place leader. It's incredibly important in terms of the function, but also to articulate that. Secondly, I think it was Donna who talked about storytelling and the need to develop that, telling your place's story and where it wants to get to in 5 or 10 years' time. So being really clear about your place's identity, its specialisms, its uniqueness, its heritage, its culture, and really being an advocate for that, because you understand it, but actually those other ones around the table won't necessarily. Evidencing current and future need, and really providing case studies of what works locally, and there will be an awful lot from a district council perspective. So point 2. Point 3, Donna's talked about the lived experience, collating feedback, getting your community teams, your regeneration teams to feed into that process so that there is a real live understanding of what the opportunities and barriers are, and gear any future consultation engagement activity around the process. And then finally, number 4, I think it's around identifying your assets and being quite cold cut about it, itemizing them in terms of both the tangible and intangible. What are your current partnerships, your coalitions, the networks, connections, and relationships? What are the community assets that are used to deliver really important local support? And what are the capacities and capabilities of communities in your place as well? So really putting together that place-based picture, I think, is of critical importance and helps you to articulate.
Thank you very much, Mark. That's really helpful. So just on that, you mentioned what good looks like in 5 years or 10 years even. Just to take, there's some really good practical steps there that councils can be getting on with right now. But Donna, I wonder if I could just ask you, when leaders are thinking about what good looks like, the temptation in council land recently, because of really short-term budgets and things, is to not really think much beyond the next year. So what should they be thinking about in terms of, in 5 years, what does good look like, and how do they get into that mindset?
Yeah, I mean, I think given that most unitary and Met councils are spending 80% of their resources on social care, whether it's children's or adult social care, I think that's got to be at the heart of the new what good looks like. I think we need to think about more innovative and exciting models of social care, which are, I think we know that the children's social care model is completely broken nationally at the moment. Again, personal view. I think it needs complete remodelling and rethinking, starting with neighbourhood support and support from a different model of social work within neighbourhoods and within communities. Similarly, with adult social care, I think there needs to be a reimagining of adult social care, which is not this distant silo commissioned model. And I think that's something that districts could really help with, because they're so rooted in communities. I think they could really help with those, that remodelling of the 80% of spend of a unitary or a Met. So really get stuck in there. Your communities, you know them much more intimately than a larger, more distant county council, for example, or a larger neighbouring Met, I believe. So I think that's got to be the starting point. Better services, I think, Andrew, looking at it not from the lens of the local government leadership, but thinking about it from a person's point of view. What would better services look like for a person in South Cambridgeshire, for example? What would they actually look like? And it would be much more integration between health and social care, for example. I think what's really exciting about the strategic authority is the link to health and the link to the integrated care boards. And I'm not sure if people saw yesterday, but the NHS England long-term planning guidance came out around neighbourhood care, and some really exciting work in there around how we spend 46% of the NHS resources on 7% of the population. So how can district councils really get to grips with those 7% and help the bigger local authorities and NHS structures to understand how to work differently with that 7%. I think that's what good would look like. Better services, more affordable, more survivable, and more able to do long-term planning with citizens.
Brilliant, Donna. Thank you very much. There's a few questions coming in now, but I've just got one more I want to cover off. So, Liz, I imagine for leaders of district councils, this is going to be quite a confusing, chaotic time, because there is no playbook in terms of who you should be talking to and in what order. And there will be plenty of conversations going on, both between districts and counties, but also between districts. And what are the most important things from your experience of what these discussions should be focusing on at this point?
So we're really quite early on in the process at the moment. So the conversations now will be focused on getting that initial proposal to government. And it's important that that initial proposal isn't just what the chiefs and leaders think it should be, it's what the community should be. It's about what the opportunity should be. It's really difficult as well, because everybody's used to keeping their own sovereignty, and now to try and look at the positive future that Donna was talking around, and around what's in it for the residents, how can we change things for the better and make sure that we have a better future, is a really difficult conversation to have. However, in my experience, as you move through, and once that structural changes order has become legislation effectively, and it is inevitable, people's mindsets start to change, and they know that certainty brings a different conversation. So now it would be difficult conversations and trying to focus on those outcomes and the benefits of change and what can go into the proposal. Co-design if you can, but it's such a short time scale. Getting those voice of the residents, of the community groups, of those other partners, and particularly health and police in there. You need local support to the proposal, but it's really difficult to have those. But then over time, those conversations will flip, and it will be easier to have those conversations, focusing on getting high level agreement to principles. Mark talked around those sort of design principles, visions and values. You need to know yourself before you can build the future. So being clear about those, and those conversations around how do we get that collective view, start thinking about that. So we're focusing on the why and the benefits now. As you've said, Andrew, there will be lots and lots of process, unbelievable amount. Disaggregating the county council is no mean feat. And I think North Northamptonshire and West Northamptonshire have only just agreed their balance sheet now, 4 years after the fact. So let's not worry about the process, because the process will be the process. Say from legal on vesting day, But what you do with that and how you achieve the outcomes is really, really important. So I think that those conversations focusing on the benefits and the why we're doing things really important now. Relationships and, as I've said, governance before, making sure that there's a structure for how you can have those conversations in a safe space as well. There will be negativity, there will be people that aren't on board yet, but that will change over time, and recognising that actually you can't all be on the same page at the same time, but as long as you get there eventually, I think will be really important. Keeps focused on what's important for you and what you want to do and how you can influence the future of what becomes the new unitary authority. I think is really know yourself before you know what you want. I think that's sort of my message.
Know yourself. Great. That's good advice for all positions.
Yeah, okay.
Know yourself.
And then don't forget to look at, you can learn from others as well and look for best practice and have conversations outside of your normal networks. Go out, look for opportunities to talk to other people. Look for ways that you can engage more people and get different conversations, because if you only have the same conversations with the same people, you won't grow and learn. So that's would be my advice. Really.
Thank you very much, Liz. And it was just interesting there. You mentioned, I think you mentioned police there as just an important stakeholder to engage with. And Donna, you mentioned the guidance that's come out around neighbourhood working within in the NHS. I think we found it really interesting when we're doing our radical place leadership work that it's great that health is moving towards this, but the role, and this is where districts are really good because they understand the context within which communities exist in, and the health approach to integrated working is still quite clinically focused, and it's still about responding to a presenting need rather than really genuinely getting upstream in terms of prevention. So one thing we mustn't lose through this process is that real understanding, deep understanding of connection and ability to engage with residents and understand what's really driving their presenting condition. So just wanted to make that point. Sally, the other big player and the other big process in the room here is the existing mayoral combined authorities, and then the drive towards creating new mayoral combined authorities and new strategic authorities. It'd be great to get your views on kind of that link and the different roles and what maybe we're learning.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think a lot of the conversation we've had so far is kind of looking down in that kind of middle area of local government, counties, districts, and actually it's very clear in the government's devolution white paper that should also be looking up to those mayoral authorities, strategic authorities, on what their ambitions are, because I don't think in the future it's quite clear that the government want new unitaries, local government reorganisation and strategic and mayoral authorities to work together as kind of one arm of delivery of the government. So I think whilst it's important to kind of look at how kind of communities can get involved in the new unitary, and it really speaks to a range of communities, also need to look up and think, well, what are the strategic priorities of the strategic authority, mayoral combined authority, and how can those areas work together to not kind of butt heads when it comes to service delivery and those priorities. So I think, again, it's the link there is thinking about, well, how can that work in a governance perspective? How can you make sure the seats at the table when those strategic priorities are being set at the regional level?
Yeah.
The people who've had experience in districts and know what it's like on the ground really need to be involved in those conversations. So I think we're all touching on similar points, and I think to have those conversations, you need to have really clear knowledge of what those needs are and opportunities. And I think it's really having open communication and kind of governance structures which allow for those priorities to be shared. And I think thinking back to kind of years ago when I did some work experience at GMCA, I remember each of the boroughs had kind of had a seat at the actual table and kind of met quite frequently to discuss regional priorities. So I think it's that model of relationship building, both looking down but also looking up, to have those shared priorities and be able to be one voice to government together, I think is important.
Thank you, Sally. That's good. Just as you were talking there, it reminded me. So there's a, not to plug the Radical Reformers podcast, but there's an episode coming out tomorrow with Kirsten England, who's the former the chief exec at Bradford. And one of the things that she says on it is consider the role of councils. Now, I think she was saying this on behalf of a unitary. As Donna said, 80% of your time is spent on children's social care, adult social care, not discretionary stuff, statutory responsibilities which need met. Now, if the plan is for that remaining 20% to be dictated from a regional strategic authority, what wriggle room does that leave for councils to be themselves and to engage? So that's just, it's not really a question, it's a statement. I mean, anybody can come in if they have a thought on that, but I'd never thought about it that way before. And it's really quite worrying, I think. So, yes, yeah, Donna, come in, please.
Sorry, yeah, I see it a little bit differently to Kirsten.
Okay.
So, I mean, I can
That's
see
all
where
right.
you're coming from. But I think, you know, it depends on the mayor and it depends on the type of approach that the CA takes. So in Greater Manchester, for example, Andy Burnham's approach is 50% growth in the GM strategy and 50% reform. And some of that reform work is essential to the transformation of children's and adult social care in each of the 10 districts in GM, each of the 10, you know, local authorities within GM. So I think it depends on the nature of what the CA decides to do, rather than doing just additional nice to do things. It's how do we actually work together to do some of the stuff that Mutual Ventures is leading on, Andrew, like the regional care cooperatives, you know, where you're trying to bring together and get better value for the money of the local authorities by thinking differently about how you provide care, thinking differently about the model of support to people who are out of work. So in GM, for example, they've repurposed job centres to develop them as live well centres that don't just look at the issues around employability. They look at health, mental health, physical health, you know, barriers to employment, childcare, things like that. And I think it really does depend on the nature of the CA itself.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Thanks, Donna. You can tell there's a real live and interesting debate here, and I think the reality will be very different in different places. So I'm just going to bring in a couple of questions here. I've already picked a couple of them and slotted them in, but really good one here from Hilton. And it's, we in Hastings are interested in looking at a federated approach, keeping the principles of districts and boroughs and removing the county layer. Are there examples of this type of approach? Also really keen to rethink how generally it's organized. I don't think I'm aware of like anything, well, there's certainly nothing like a formal federation, but I don't know, is anybody aware of something that works in that way? I mean, I guess a county council with its districts is a kind of a quasi federated approach anyway. No, I don't think I'm sorry. I don't think I know anything there. It's a good idea though, interesting idea, good model to explore. There's another one here from Helen Paisley, and the question is about the impact on county-wide public health interventions. You know, things like water fluoridation, and that's interesting. And I'll just, whilst others are thinking about that, Liz, you might have thoughts about how public health kind of evolved in Northamptonshire, but I know from having a really good conversation with Lucy Whiteman on one of the Radical Reformers podcast episode, who at the time was the director of public health in Essex. They very much had district model where they had public health teams within each of the districts, and that was definitely seen as the right way to approach public health, because it is a really community embedded thing. So I don't know, does anybody, Liz, do you have any thoughts on how public health was dealt with in Northamptonshire?
Lucy was the DPH for Northamptonshire at
the time.
At one point,
she was.
Yes. So, but then she moved on as and didn't go into the unitary authorities. But we did. We looked at how we shared a DPH across the two and had one DPH across the two, so that you could work. And we tried that again with the DCS I didn't do the adult social cares, but trying to get those sort of key determinants of health actually are what district bread and butters are around. You know, that housing, safe and secure place to live, a good home to live in, employment and skills, and communities to help you. So some of those key determinants of health we already do as districts, and I think the key is really not, if you disaggregated it, you could still work together. You can still have that approach, because we should already be looking at that systems approach from a district and a county approach, and you know, from safety for the police and the healthcare partners. So I think if we just keep the principles of that systems approach and how we take it forward, I'm not sure that it matters whether you're disaggregating it or not. It will be more difficult, but actually you can still look for where you have the similarities, not the differences. That's all I could say really.
No, I think that's fair, Liz. That's fair. Just on a more practical point, Liz, people will also be thinking about what capacity and capabilities they may need within their district to engage with this sort of process. What was your experience of that?
So I talked about capacity as one of the big challenges at the start, and it is because, and I said then, if you're chief exec or leader, this is now your day job. So you need to look at the capacity in your own organisation to keep business as usual going, but also the project management office for local government reorganisation is massive, huge, and takes a lot of time, effort and resource and money. So it is a costly experience. Obviously, you need to keep those PMO skills and those change management skills. I think it's really important to embed change management and acceptance of the change going forward as well as those project management skills. But equally, the leadership role is really important. So I guess if you're looking at how you can empower your staff as well to take advantage of this and to gain experience and knowledge, don't always, sorry but say this, Andrew, don't always outsource to consultants. They have their place and are very useful, and we cannot do it without you. But actually how we can empower and create capacity and skills, but you do need to backfill it because you can't do everything. So
no, I completely, I actually completely agree, and I think it's really important for places to drive as much of the change, certainly from a program management perspective internally. Like, by all means, get in external expertise where it's not part of the council's day to day, but you're absolutely right on that, I think. And just coming back, I'd like to come back to turn this around to end on a really positive, kind of optimistic note. So I started by saying about how this is an opportunity for transformation, not just a transaction. And I'd love to get your thoughts on that, because it really is. And if our work, Donna and Mark and Sally, on radical place leadership has taught us anything, it's that the way organizations within the public sector, within the third sector, work together at a place level, it's not sustainable. You know, we talk about the cost of constantly assessing people, asking them to tell their story repeatedly, passing people from pillar to post, and for them to have ever decreasing outcomes. We have to grasp this as an opportunity to reform public services as well, don't we? Donna, can I come to you first, because I know that you've got really strong thoughts on this as a general topic, but this can be framed as an opportunity, can't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Across all services, but particularly, I think, care, particularly adults and children's social care. I think we spent in Wigan 80% of our time and money on assessing people, and only 20% of our time on actually helping and supporting them, costing between $250,000 and $500,000 a year between the various agencies. And that model is financially unsustainable. It's where all our money is going. It's the gaps within the handoffs between the different agencies. And that's what the NHS guidance yesterday on neighbourhood working was saying. Stop just talking about integration. Really start with the person, very much like Mark Smith's liberated method. Start with the person. build the support around them. So I think having that mindset from a district perspective where you are much closer to your citizens and your communities, it's just inevitable. I knew everyone's name at Chorley Council who worked for me. I knew them all, and you do, don't you, Liz? You kind of get to know people, but much more intimately in a smaller footprint. So I think taking that knowledge of that person-centered approach and applying it, and you can apply it to a 500,000 population. You can, that's what Andy Burnham's approach is in GM with 4 million people. It's, names, not numbers. Start with individuals and wrap support and care around them. That's the transformed strategic authority, I think.
Thank you very much. Sally, just thinking about some of the work that we've been doing with districts, which up to this point hasn't specifically been focused on LGR, but what would your instinct be on this as an opportunity for transformation, not just a moving around of offices and bums on seats?
Yes, indeed. I was just thinking that actually it's probably going to be quite easy to be disheartened by the whole process if you're an officer in a district council and you kind of think, oh, well, it doesn't matter what I do because it's going to be a new organisation anyway. And I think what could happen instead is actually think, well, yeah, it's an opportunity for change, and then really push forward on those ambitious things that you maybe haven't had time to really push forward because it's not been part of the day job, or use this time to think more widely. Try and use it as a time where you have a bit more headspace and think, well, actually, with more resource, working with a strategic mayor or MCA, what would we really want to focus on, and kind of use that to really have those discussions and have those priorities imagined. And I think that would really set officers in good stead in the next organisation, because it's not going to be fun just to be, as you said, 2P'd over and kind of doing the same thing, not feeling that it's really actually made a change to the populations on the ground, but using this time, because as Liz said, it might be 2-3 years until it actually happens, to really think about, well, what can and should we change, and what's possible in kind of in that next organisation.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right, Sally, and I just kind of want to flag as well that we're not diminishing what a horrendously complicated technical challenge this is, and there is that baseline of ensuring that everything is legal and everything is safe, and that in itself can feel like an impossible task when you're moving things around, when services are being delivered live. The people receiving social care can't pause their need because there's a reorganization going on. So we're really aware of that, but also I think it has a much greater chance of success if there's a positive story to tell as well, which is really important. Mark, before we close out here, have we any idea about the LGR timetable? I know there's information coming out probably even as we speak, but what do we know about what the timetable is?
So what we know about the timetable is what's in the white paper. So there's two cohorts of areas. The first is those that have submitted their expression of interest for the devolution priority programme. And broadly speaking, I think they'll be finding out relatively soon what the outcome of that submission was. But over March to May, there's the requirement to submit their proposals, meaning that local elections would be postponed if the minister gives approval for that. And then ultimately shadow authorities coming into play through elections in May 26 with a view to the new unitary authorities establishing in April 2027. That's what's in the white paper. It's subject to change. The other cohort is those that aren't part of that priority programme, didn't submit, and things there become a bit broader. And I think that's what Liz was referring to. I think there needs to be there's a deadline for authorities to submit any proposals for LGR by the autumn of this year, and then that sort of rolling phase of LGR establishing from April 27 to April 28. So it's pretty vague on that front. There's more detail on the priority programme. But as you said, I think there's going to be announcements in the next couple of days, which would probably firm things up.
Maybe even today.
Maybe,
yeah. Thank you so much, everyone. Does anybody have anything they want to say that they didn't get the chance to say? Or have we got it all out on the table, do we think, as far as we know? Yes, Donna.
Yeah, I think it struck a chord with me what Liz said about being positive and see this as an opportunity. I know it's a bit scary, but see this as an opportunity to really reshape and reform rather than just, moving deck chairs around, and really, exciting. That's why we became public servants, to help people and help people in creative and innovative ways.
Yeah, thanks, Donna. Liz?
Sorry, it just moved on my screen, Andrew. I was trying to unmute you instead of myself. So I would just reiterate that to Donna, that what Donna's just said is that actually it is draining and it is quite intense, but it is really positive. I got myself involved with the creation of Children's Trust and the Children's Services, which as a district chief, I would never have got involved with. And it was really exciting to be part of that change and to learn new skills and to grow as an individual. So embrace the positive part of it as well. As there is goodness in this, and as long as we create it properly, then we can create something that's much better than we've already got. Fingers crossed.
Yeah, I think Liz, that's where we first met you, isn't it? When we were doing the work on the Northamptonshire Trust. Right, it's 3 minutes to. I'm going to let everybody go, and well, barely time to make a cup of tea before your next meeting. But thank you so much to Donna, Liz, Mark, Sally. Thank you to all of you for joining. We'll be sending a follow-up email with the link to the recording and also a note with some of the key points. So thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.